Well, hello from wherever you join us around Australia or indeed around the world. It's great to have you here on this Thursday evening. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which I meet and those where everyone is meeting or joining from this evening, and pay our respects to elders past and present. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our host for this evening, Renza Shabilia. Over to you, Renza.
Thank you so much, Tim. And the reason that we've got Tim doing our acknowledgement to country is because I am not on country today. I am actually joining you live from New York. It's 3 a.m. So please forgive any early morning fumbling and bumbling as we go. But can I just say, could I be any more excited? I don't care that it's 3 a.m. because I am speaking to Bill Polonsky. Bill Polonsky is one of my absolute heroes in the diabetes world. I never tire of hearing him speak. I had to go and buy a second copy of his book because the first one became so dog-eared and had so many notes all over it. This is such a treat that we have him here. I'm not even going to introduce him because I'm going to throw to him so he can introduce himself, and then we'll set the scene for what we're going to do tonight, and we'll take it from there. Bill, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us all about you.
Thank you, Renza. That was the best greeting ever. Well, I'm here in Sydney. I came all the way to Australia to see you, and then I heard you were like, so I'm a little sad. So hello, everyone. My name is Bill Polonsky. I actually live in California. I live in San Diego. I'm a professor in the Department of Medicine at the University of California in San Diego, and I run a nonprofit called the Behavioral Diabetes Institute. I'm a diabetes psychologist, and our institute is, I'm very proud to say, the world's first and I think still only nonprofit organization in the world wholly dedicated to addressing and understanding the unmet emotional needs of people with diabetes. And I still work as a clinician. It's been my honor and continues to be my honor to meet and learn from many thousands of people living with diabetes every day. And we do a lot of research, wearing my academic hat to understand the emotional side. And we get to train a lot of healthcare providers to hopefully help them to be more effective and better and nicer to their patients. So that's me.
Oh, and we are so lucky to have you here. And we're talking all about the emotional side of diabetes tonight. So Bill is going to do a short presentation, and I'm going to jump off screen and he will share some slides. And please keep any questions coming throughout that. You can use the comment section of Facebook. If you've got a question and you don't want your name to be seen by everybody, you can send us a direct message at Diabetes Australia, and that will be sent to me, and I won't read your name out when I ask that question. We'd love these to be as interactive as possible, as always. And while you have Bill Polonsky on the other side of your screen, you should really take advantage of that and ask him lots and lots of questions. So Bill, I'm going to ask if you could please share your screen and we will get the slides started. Fabulous. I'm going to turn my camera off for a moment. Thank you.
Hopefully you can see my slides. And by the way, for everyone who is listening and watching, I'm going to be mercifully brief, because what's much more important is to hear your comments and your questions and really make this interactive with me, Renza, and with you. But I thought I could throw out a few slides to at least set the stage. So let's see if I can do that. Oh, there we go. So obviously this is me, and those are my disclosures. I work with every company in the world, now you know. So I'm here to talk about the emotional side, and there may actually be some of you on this call right now who don't have diabetes, but you're here because you care about someone who does. And you might be thinking, really? An emotional side of diabetes? I bet you've met people like that before. You know, they don't have diabetes and they think, diabetes, what's the big deal? You know, just take your insulin, take your other medications, just eat perfectly and you're done. What? But if you have diabetes and you've been living with this disease for more than, 60 seconds, you may have noticed that there in fact is an emotional side, and that's what we want to think about and talk about. The most important thing that you all know, and that we always want to highlight, is one of the major reasons that there is this important emotional side is because diabetes is so unusual. I mean, as all of you know, the day you develop diabetes, the universe gave you a new job to do. Congratulations, you didn't volunteer for it. There's no pay, there's no vacations. Oh, and you get to do it forever. So good luck with that. And by the way, you can just add that job onto everything else you do. And so when you're talking about a 24/7 job, it's not surprising that would get, if nothing else, tiring. And that leads to all these other emotional elements that we want to address. Number one, of course, is you're asked to take on this job of diabetes on top of everything else, all the other jobs in your life that you're doing, whether that means school, whether that means work, whether that means making sure your children get fed. Hopefully, what I'm showing you now is not a picture of what you're dealing with at home, but it gives you the flavor of the fact that all of us have other responsibilities. And somehow, how do you fit the work of diabetes into all that? You know, Renza knows one of my favorite type 1 diabetes bloggers in the US, Carrie Sparling. And Carrie's had type 1 for a long time, and she's very skilled and knowledgeable in managing her diabetes. And when she gives talks, she'll often talk about how sometimes she runs into days, just like I'm sure many of you do, where it seems like no matter what you do, your blood sugars go up, they go down, they go sideways. I did the same thing today that I did yesterday. How could things be so different? And Carrie loves to show this GIF that I think is just so perfect, because this really is, as we know, how easy it is to feel this way, that I just feel like sometimes I don't know what the heck I'm doing, this sense of discouragement that can happen so frequently. And I'm bringing all this up just to let you know, in case you've ever felt any of this, welcome to the club. This is super common. We also know it's really easy to feel discouraged. Again, when you feel like you're putting out your best effort some days and you're not getting the results you want, or you go to see your healthcare provider and you see some disappointing A1C or something else happens, the sense of discouragement is so common, and really can, suck the oomph right out of you. There's lots of other emotions that are super common as well. It's very easy to feel isolated. That's why I'm so glad you're here today. Most people with diabetes, especially if they have type 1 diabetes, rarely even get a chance to meet anybody else who has it. So it's easy to be, feel like this picture, isolated. And you may even have people who in your life who care about you, parents, partners, but sometimes they don't exactly get it, what you're going through. And the importance of finding some sense of connection is really key. Again, another reason why it's awesome that you're here tonight or today, wherever you are. And then we know there's often a lot of shaming and blaming associated with diabetes, which is so unreasonable and so unfair. Like, you didn't take care of your diabetes perfectly. You had a high blood sugar. Something happened. It's all your fault. And oftentimes this is from well-meaning but uninformed healthcare providers or partners or family members. And this shaming and blaming is not fair, not reasonable, doesn't really reflect anything about diabetes in terms of what the real management side of it. And yet we know it's how often people end up feeling. And so you put all that together, and not surprisingly, people can end up just being fed up, just tired of it, and saying, I don't want to deal with this 24/7 job anymore. And the extreme version of that, we call diabetes burnout. And that's the book that Renza was referring to that I wrote a long time ago, that you can get so fed up and overwhelmed that you just begin to disengage from your diabetes. Like, I don't really want to put up with this anymore. And actually, most people go through that from time to time, but if it really lasts for a really long time, it's really dangerous. So again, it's one of the reasons we always want to talk about this. I should mention how common some of these issues are. Now, you probably have heard that people with diabetes are at higher risk for depression, and that's probably true. This, what you see on this slide is the most recent large global review that looked at how common depression was in people with type 1 and type 2 diabetes around the world. And it was, in the teens, maybe as high as close to 20% of folks. The evidence suggests that's not that much different from people who don't have diabetes. But what's important is we look at this emotional side of diabetes. That's not depression. That's really what we call diabetes distress or diabetes burnout. Turns out that's a lot more common, at least twice as common. And again, our scientific studies suggest it's at least a third, maybe close to half of people who right now are really feeling very stressed out, overwhelmed, fed up, isolated, alone, confused. So again, if you've ever been through a time like that, welcome to a big club. It's been pretty normal. Doesn't mean we can't do anything about it, but just know it's really common. And by the way, if any of you visiting us tonight are partners or parents of kids with diabetes, you should know that all the evidence suggests that they're actually more overwhelmed and more stressed out than usually the person with diabetes, whether that's a kid or a teenager or an adult. Because, usually that's coming from a place of love, but they're worried about lows, about what's going to happen to you over the course of time. it's pretty big. And so it's tough for them as well. So last couple of words about what can you do about it, and then let's have a conversation. I just want to mention a couple of things. One of the things we like to talk about is it's really important to get perspective. That oftentimes we're so into the weeds day to day with our diabetes that you forget about some important facts. And so perhaps you've ever seen statements like this that come from your local diabetes organization. Diabetes is the leading cause of blindness. Diabetes is the leading cause of amputations or kidney disease. But I'd like to suggest to you that that's actually completely wrong, that it's not true. What our evidence shows us, it's not diabetes that's the issue. It's really out of control diabetes. And what we know is that actually, I should wait for a minute and just say that the evidence suggested is that well-managed diabetes is really the leading cause of nothing. And this is what we call evidence-based hope, and how important it is for people to know that with good care and with good effort, now in the 21st century, odds are pretty good you can live a long and healthy life with diabetes. And all these scary messages had a place and a role, and it's important to be aware that long-term complications can happen. But to remember, it's not diabetes that's the culprit. It's when it's out of control. And then with well control, with your efforts, you and a good healthcare team, you can really do well. And it's easy to forget that. The second thing I want to mention is it's important to give yourself a break. And what I mean by that is you don't have to do diabetes perfectly. We see people now with all sorts of technology, and they think, well, if I'm going to focus on time and range, I have to be at 100% time and range every day, and I have to, never eat anything but carbohydrates. And if I have type 2, I should definitely lose 100 pounds by tomorrow. Look, you can't do diabetes perfectly. It's hard to change habits. And the truth is, you don't have to do everything anyway. If you look at time and range, for example, the international standard says you can get to 70% time and range. That's awesome. And that really puts you on the path to really doing well and living a long and healthy life. But 70% time and range means you're out of range 6 hours a day. So we have to find this balance between managing diabetes well and having a life. And that's the compromise everybody's looking for. And you want to be able to do that in concert with a trusted healthcare professional to figure out where's that point of balance for you. Again, we know this is from one of my favorite articles that talks about all the stuff you have to do when it comes to diabetes, all the things you have to think about, all the changes you should probably make if you have diabetes. And these authors put this together and listed all the things that are often necessary with a chronic illness like diabetes. They called it the taxonomy of burden. And they listed everything in this one figure. Now, you can't read what's on this figure. I can't either. The print is way too small. The point is, there's a lot of stuff. You can't do all of it tomorrow. You can't do all of it the next day. But you can do enough with your healthcare provider so that you can pick the things that are going to be important for you. They're going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. So it's giving yourself a break and focusing on the things that are going to make a difference. So you want to make sure with your doctor, you're deciding on some kind of reasonable goal for that A1C that's reasonable for you in the immediate future. That's a compromise from doing everything you can, but also giving yourself a break and having a life. And using what we call the bang for your buck approach, meaning you can't do all 100 things tomorrow. So what are the 1 or 2 actions you can do that can really make a big difference? And, when we hear some of your comments and questions, I may tell you some stories that I've learned from my patients all the time about, for example, last type 1 person with type 1 I saw, the biggest bang for his buck, he kept thinking, well, I need to start eating better and exercising regularly. But for him, the clear thing was, I need to start making sure I'm not missing so much of my basal insulin every day, that was going to give him the easiest thing to do to give him the biggest bang. So it's easy to lose perspective on those things. And again, you don't have to do everything. We're always saying you can do this one step at a time. Otherwise, you can get overwhelmed. And so it's why it's so nice to have someone you can work with, which can help support you as you're trying to do that. And the last thing I want to mention is this, and hopefully it's also why you're involved in this program tonight. If at all possible, don't do diabetes alone. We know that when you start getting overwhelmed and fed up with diabetes, what helps people to keep going is when you got somebody in your life who cares about you, who really wishes you well and cares about you in the right way, who's supporting you in the way that really works for you. And I don't mean nagging you and bugging you and being what we call a diabetes policeman, but supports you in the way that makes a difference. Maybe laughs with you when you're having a crazy day with your blood sugars, or congratulates you when things seem to be working well. And also that, of course, you want to take the time to, meet other people who are living every day with diabetes as well, who understand it, who get it. You can do that online. You can do that in your own communities. There's so many resources and places where you can find them. Here's just a list of some of the places that we're aware of that can allow you to get connected to other people. I'm not going to go through this list that includes Diabetes Australia, JDRF for Australia, Beyond Type 1, and more and more and more. But there's a lot of things and a lot of opportunities. And if you forget everything else, that's the biggest one. Find ways to get connected. Don't do diabetes alone. It's the best way to really address diabetes distress. So, friends, I tried to be brief. It's impossible for me to be brief, but I did the best I could. But I want to at least bring up this issue that the emotional side, as you know, is really common. It's really important, and we don't talk about it enough. So I'm just so delighted that I could be here with you.
Yeah, and I think we can't separate the emotional side from living with diabetes. Like, I feel like we need to get to a point where it's just part of diabetes. We stop trying to separate it from the blood glucose management, and that's the big focus on what we're eating and our insulin. And then as a little adjunct at the end, sometimes we talk about our emotions and the mental health challenges. They go hand in hand. You can't do one without the other. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, in my excitement and enthusiasm to introduce you earlier, there was one thing I didn't mention, and I'm going to mention it now. And we need to say a huge thank you to Omnipod Australia, who have brought you to Australia. And I know you're doing a whirlwind tour speaking about topics like this, which is so wonderful, raising awareness about the emotional challenges of diabetes. So thanks to Omnipod for bringing us, Bill, here. We're absolutely delighted that we've been able to host you for this Q&A, but even more broadly across the nation, and speaking mostly with healthcare professionals. And I think that's just always such an important thing for you to be sharing this message. Now, hopefully everybody who's watching at home, you can now understand why I never tire of hearing Bill speak, because so much of what you say, Bill, resonates. It just makes so much sense. And there are a couple of things that I just want to touch on. In fact, I just want to talk about those last couple of points that you made there. Let's talk about that importance of that peer support piece. How important is that? And how is that something that people can really look to help them with their diabetes, with living with diabetes?
It's this important. It's the most, from your own life, it's probably the most important thing that there is. And I'm sure that most people can understand that diabetes is so isolating as it is. And we know, I can think beyond diabetes. If you're a human being and you're trying to figure out how to make positive, healthy changes in your life that you really need to keep doing over the course of time, and they're challenging tasks and challenging behaviors, anybody is going to do better when you got somebody in your life who's on your side, who's going to be your cheerleader, who's going to be providing you the support in the right way. Now, the right way means different things for different people, but it's probably, again, the most important thing there is.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I think it wasn't until I actually really started building this network of people with diabetes around me in, online, in real life, everywhere, could not turn around without there being easy access to people with diabetes, that I realized how much that had been missing. And I say now that it's just as important as the magical devices I wear and the health professionals I see. It's, this helps me make my diabetes make sense. And that's really, really important. And we know that from people who are, watching, and, their involvement with peer support groups and that doesn't, and I think that when we say peer support groups, for a lot of people, they think it's got to be this formalized thing. It can be going for a walk with somebody or having a coffee with somebody with diabetes. And that often is that connection that you need to make. We've got some really great comments coming in. Now, this is a really great question. Somebody said, can you please talk about the emotional side of being prescribed medications? I think this is really important for people perhaps with type 2 diabetes who, have been told this is something that you can manage with diet and exercise. And medications are sort of almost held over as a threat, which is such a terrible thing to do. And then suddenly when it's, okay, you must be on these now, people are almost made to feel like they've failed, where instead this is just part of their diabetes management. How do you speak about that with people?
Oh, I'm so glad that was asked. It's one of my very favorite questions.
Great question. Yeah.
So, it is true, first of all, that any medication you're ever being recommended to take will always have potential negatives. all of them, literally all of them, but they have been recommended to you, hopefully by a trusted healthcare professional, because that person has this idea that there's some positive value. And any medication you have, you're gonna have to, you're weighing those two things. Okay, well, this, there's something potential negative that could happen, but there's also something potential positive. And how do I make that decision? And we see that all the time. I know, in my country, for example, if you have type 2 diabetes, you're most likely to be prescribed metformin or glucophage when you're first diagnosed. And many people say, oh, I wouldn't want to take any medication. I should be able to do this on my own, as if that means I'm doing better, that you somehow can measure your health by whether you're on medication or not, or by how much medication you're taking. And it's a very insidious thinking. But in truth, if you want to know how well you're doing, you need to know what your numbers are. You need to know about your A1C and your blood pressure and your cholesterol level and things like that. And if that takes 0 medication or 1 medication or 2 medications, in truth, it probably doesn't really matter. What matters are you helping to reach those safe numbers that could support you in living a long and healthy life? I'm going to tell you something quickly, though. So I've had people come to me all the time and say, oh, I don't want to take metformin because, I go, yeah, I know it'll improve your blood sugars. God forbid, that would be so scary, wouldn't it? You go, no, but I've heard there bad things could happen, and they'll tell me things. I'm going, well, yeah, but that's incredibly unlikely. But then I'll warn them, there are some new side effects to metformin and glucophage that are appearing in the literature. One is it looks like it may lower your risk for certain forms of cancer. And then people go, that's a side effect? I go, yeah. And there's some early evidence it may actually even prevent dementia. That's a side effect? Yeah. So we just have to talk about these things differently. And then people say, well, but I'd rather just use something natural. And I go, oh, you mean we could find some plant, let's say a lilac bush, and we could somehow extract, the juice from a lilac bush. And if that helped, would you be willing to take that? Yes. Well, we've done that, and it's called metformin, actually. So people go, oh, well, maybe that's doable then. But in truth, everybody feels this way. I sometimes find myself going back to my own doctor and saying, I'd really like to get off this blood pressure medication I've been taking for a while. And he goes, well, how's your blood pressure, Bill? And I go, well, it's perfect. He goes, so I guess it's working, huh? And I go, yeah. And we forget, right? So we can tell how well we're doing by what our numbers are. And that's really what's critical. But anyway, I'll slow down. I could talk about that all the time.
But I think, though, that you raise a really important point here. It's that all of those conversations that give a really, far better, well-rounded picture and put things in perspective, and you've talked about perspective being important here, they don't happen. And how different things would be if they were part of the conversation rather than just take this medication because you failed to do everything else or whatever, it's rarely in that, such black and white context. But, if things were presented in that way, in a far more gentle and informative way, perhaps people wouldn't be so hesitant.
I think you're right. I think we all as healthcare providers need to do a better job of being respectful of our patients and be able to say, of course you feel mixed about taking medication for any reason. And to be able to say, what are your concerns? Let's talk about it. And I want to make sure what we're picking is the best thing for you. And if you're feeling iffy about it, we need to talk about it more. So I'm with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one of the other things that I thought was really interesting in your short talk there, Bill, was where you were speaking about support people and how they feel and the distress that they experience. And I wonder how those conversations can happen between the person with diabetes and loved ones to find a good balance. Oh, and I'm going to ask a part B to that because I've got so many questions, but is part of that distress that they might be feeling because they feel that they can't fix the situation?
Yeah, well, there's a couple reasons, right? I mean, so the people in our lives who care about us and love us want to help. And the biggest mistake that they often make is they skip over the most important step, which is to ask you how they can be of help. And instead they become, which is understandable that all of us can do, become mind readers and say, I know the kind of help you need. You need me to advise you how to eat better every single meal. Yes. Yeah, I think that'll work. But of course, that's a really bad idea.
It's not
but
good.
In truth,
it doesn't work.
Yeah, if you care about someone who has diabetes, just presume you don't know how to be of help. but I honor you for caring enough that you want to. And you've got someone near you who can help you figure out what that is. And all you have to do is ask.
Yeah.
I need to be involved. I want to be involved in some way that isn't in your face, that isn't invasive. Give me something to do. Let me know what would be the best way to support you. Make it a conversation.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if I've shared this with our Facebook Live audience, but I know that I've written about this and spoken about it. So I was diagnosed as an adult, and my now husband was my fiance at the time. And at first, gosh, when I was having a bad diabetes day, he did exactly that. He wanted to workshop it and try and fix it. Have you done this? Have you tried this? Anyway, that never helped. But what he learnt pretty quickly, I might add, and this is my cup of tea theory, is that he needs to say to me, diabetes sucks, because it does, and then bring me a cup of tea. I don't want him to fix it because we can't fix diabetes, but a cup of tea makes things so much better. And that's for me. That's what works for us and what works for, for our situation. So he doesn't need to try and work out how to fix diabetes, because there ain't no fixing diabetes, but he can make me feel better in the moment. And that has made such a difference. It is so, and I feel like he is my champion. He's really on my side. So having those conversations with loved ones around you to find out what your cup of tea is, I highly recommend that, because I think that that's something that that has been a real game changer for us in our, living harmoniously with me having diabetes. Just these sorts of things are these are the sorts of conversations that we might want to be having with our loved ones to help find a good balance.
Absolutely. And Renzo, that's a perfect example. So I'm going to put on my academic hat in for a minute and say, we actually published a study last year where we actually asked people who were using, in this case, Dexcom Share. So they had a continuous glucose monitor, and they were, and unlike many adults, they were actually willing to share their data moment to moment with their loved one. And we were looking at under what conditions is that a good thing as opposed to a bad thing. And really where it was a good thing was very much like what your husband figured out with you. How are you providing some kind of usually nonverbal kind of positive support when you're when things are just having a sucky day, and also recognizing and celebrating with you when you're having a great day. Yeah. Just those two things can really mean a lot, but don't take my word for it or your word for it. You should ask.
Exactly. And I think actually, though, you do bring up a really good point, and that is being able to share data, because I see that as such a double-edged sword. There is so much great stuff about that, but I also know how that can be really such a contentious thing. And I've heard some really great stories about how adults have made that work. So this is different, and these conversations still do need to happen with parents and kids and understanding that. But the things that I always hear about that I think are really important is consent. So everybody being comfortable with it, so nobody feeling that they're being forced to share their data. So the person with diabetes controls that data, but also having understandings about when there is a discussion about it. So I remember hearing one, and I adopted this when I don't share now, but when I used to, was she told me that her partner was allowed to speak with her when she was low, and if she hadn't replied to a text, but there was no discussion about high glucose levels, because she felt that it was judgy and she was dealing with it. She didn't want to hear about it. And so that worked really beautifully for them. And again, it's all about having that conversation about what works in your situation. We need to be talking more.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And I think what you described is why it looks like to me so many people who are wearing a CGM actually, as adults, choose to never share with anybody.
Yeah,
because
right.
I'm just going to get hassled. I'm going to get judged. I'm going to get bothered. I'm going to get bugged. And so they say, count me out.
Yeah.
And that when it works is when you have some out loud agreement about, okay, I'm willing to share with you, but here's how you're going to behave. So the etiquette version of that. And I think the thing I've learned the most is I'll share my data with you a little bit. We'll talk about exactly when and if you should respond. But here's the most important thing. Whatever you see, never ask me why.
Exactly right. Exactly. Because there's often no why. And even if there is, who cares? It's not relevant to me right in this moment. We've got the most beautiful comment here. Somebody said, for me, I always ask for anyone to just bring me my dog. I get that. Oh, I get that.
I love that.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Bill, I always love the way that, you start these conversations about, the way that we talk about diabetes and there is a brilliant card from the Behavioral Diabetes Institute called the Diabetes Etiquette card. Can you tell everyone a bit about that? And while you're doing that, I will just say that Nalin, who operates everything and makes all of these Facebook Lives happen, he's going to share this in the comments so people will be able to find the PDF online. You won't need to go searching for it. I had this card stuck up on my office door for a very, very, very long time because I just felt that it was such important information. Can you tell everyone about this?
Sure. So we developed the etiquette cards a number of years ago because one of the things we kept hearing from the folks we were working with is, one thing that really bothers me is I keep meeting people, sometimes they're family members, sometimes they're coworkers, who just say the most annoying things in the world.
Right.
And I just want to punch them. But, it never seems right to punch them because they usually mean well. They're just being annoying. And so one day it just hit us like, wow, wouldn't it be great if next time someone says something annoying to you, you could just say, oh, you must not know the rules about how to behave. And so we developed the Diabetes Etiquette card, which is, as people see, it's a little unfolded accordion card with the 10 rules of diabetes etiquette that are for real, but also are supposed to be amusing because the purpose is to open a conversation. So you can so it actually says on the front, diabetes etiquette for people who don't have diabetes. So you can give them the card. Rule number 1 is don't offer unsolicited advice about my eating or any other aspect of my diabetes. My personal favorite is number 3, which is when you find out I have diabetes, don't tell me horror stories about your grandmother.
Oh, right.
Like, oh, you have diabetes? That's such a coincidence. My grandmother died a horrible, painful death from diabetes. Let me tell you all about it. Not interested. So,
useful.
Yeah. So the etiquette cards turned into, we just thought it would be kind of fun. And to our surprise, they took off. And there's about 500,000 of them somewhere floating around the world right now. And they can access them through you. And whoever's put something up, they can access them on our website. We do have a version, by the way, we developed later for teenagers to give to their parents. Because the rules are a little different. Like one of the rules is, mom and dad, when we meet someone new, could you wait, I don't know, at least 60 seconds before you tell them I have diabetes? So we think those are really important. It's funny, when we developed those cards and we gave them to a group of parents to ask them what they thought of it, the parents started crying and they said, oh my God, I'm breaking all these rules. I said, look, you don't have to follow any of these rules. The point is, I just want you to know what your kids are thinking and what they like, and now you should go have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
Parents also thought we should develop etiquette cards to give to their teens, and I said, why? What would be the? So we never did that.
That wouldn't be just for diabetes. I mean, I have a teenager. I am all for her having etiquette cards about, but it's not that. I don't know that it'd be any different.
In this year, if we go that out here, it'd be pointless. Don't bother.
Teens are delightful. I think they're magical people. We've had a couple of questions about people who are living with diabetes. I'm just going to skip across that. Diabetes and other health conditions as well. And we've had questions from people saying that this often impacts us even more emotionally. So what advice do you have for people with that reality? So it's not just diabetes, it's diabetes and whatever else it might be.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many other things, right? So if you have type 1, you might be running into celiac disease, you might have thyroid disorder. If you have type 2 diabetes and you've been on this planet long enough, you might be accumulating all sorts of other health problems. And it's just a lot more to juggle. And there's often a lot more stuff you have to do every day, and it can pile up. So it just becomes more and more challenging. And then of course, if you run into any, early complications, all those things can just wear you down even more so. I'm not sure there's anything more special to say other than we just have to be respectful and listen and see what we can do and how we can be of help, and say, you can't tackle everything all at once. So how do you do what you can do?
Yep. Tiny bits at a time. Yeah. Bill, are we talking about diabetes burnout and diabetes distress more? Are we getting better at actually acknowledging that this is part and parcel of diabetes compared with, say, 10 years ago?
Yes, I think we definitely are.
Yeah.
And it's very funny because I hear from more and more people, I see more and more things written about it. And what I see written is usually the sense of surprise, like, this whole emotional side of diabetes, this is kind of important. I'm going, thank you. Thank you. I've been talking about this for 30 plus years. Thank you. But it is, I've seen the change without any doubt. It's become more of something we could talk about it without having to be quiet about it or shameful about it. It's part and parcel of the way things go. Why wouldn't it be important? Why isn't it something that, just like you described, has to be integrated into everything you have to do when you're dealing with this tough job that's so challenging? And there's no need to have it to be shameful. It should be part of our armamentarium of how we can be more successful and help ourselves live long, healthy lives. So we've seen the shift over the years, and we still have a significantly long way to go, but the improvements are there and happening.
Yeah. We had a campaign this year during our National Diabetes Week in Australia, which runs in July each year. And it was the third year of a 3-year campaign about diabetes and mental health, Heads Up on Diabetes. And this year's campaign was all about good mental health care being part of diabetes care. And, they go hand in hand. We might share, Nalin, share in our comments, our Heads Up campaign, because there's some really important information in there. But, I think you're right. I think we definitely are seeing a shift. We're very fortunate in Australia. We have the Australian Centre for Behavioural Research in Diabetes that, with the director, Jane Spate, who is a frequent guest on our, and other members of her team, a frequent guest on our Facebook Lives. And I feel that we are having this conversation more and more. I never will say, I don't think, we've done this conversation. I think we need to keep bringing it in, and it needs to be part of everyday diabetes conversations. And I don't think we're quite there yet. What do you think about that?
I agree. And I want to highlight what you just said and make sure there's a good shout out to Jane and her team in Melbourne and to you. It's because of you guys that we're seeing, and I get to see it all the way in California, how much you in Australia are really bringing this to the public and really making this a bigger deal and a more acceptable deal, and something that we talk about a lot more. When I look around the world and what's going on, I don't talk to you enough to say this, but I think yay to my colleagues like Renza and the folks in Melbourne and Jane and her gang to say you're making it happen. So I just hope you are contagious as we try to help other people around the world appreciate this. So thank you.
In the best possible ways. I know next week there is the World Diabetes Congress in Lisbon, and I'm delighted to be traveling to that and knowing that a big part of that meeting will be talking about the mental health aspects and challenges of diabetes. And Bill, you are on the program of pretty much every professional conference, I think, around the world. And it's great that you are part of those conversations and that we're having them. And I just think we need to keep doing that. We just have to keep doing that. Let's talk. We're just about ready to wrap up. We haven't got much longer. So if anybody's got a last minute question that they want to jump in, we've got lots of comments, and I'm not going to have time to read all the comments, but I would absolutely, if you've got any questions, please do pop them in there. Let's talk about your book, Diabetes Burnout. Why did you write that? And when did you write that? I know you said that it's an old book, and I feel like I've had that for almost all of my diabetes life. But I haven't, but for a lot of it. Tell us about the book.
It's a great source of embarrassment how old that book is, actually. It's older than probably many people on this call. So Burnout was published in 1999. So it was the last century.
Oh, wow.
And, and I remember I wrote it because there wasn't anything. And it was just something we were talking about and sharing with our patients when I was back at the Joslin Diabetes Center in Boston. And I went, well, this is kind of crazy. We should be putting this down on paper and think about how we can practically explain all this to folks and provide sort of helpful ideas about what to do. And I was very proud of that. And over the course of years, every once in a while, I'll sit back in the midst of everything else I'm doing, busy like you, think, really should probably turn out a second edition after 20 plus years. And I actually have just about finished a second edition, and I'm hoping it may get published next year, but it took me that long. So when people tell me they've just bought a copy, I always thank them. But in my head, I'm going, really? Can you still buy it? I mean, it's older than dirt at this point. But luckily, when we talk about the emotional side of diabetes, the stuff that's in that book, even now, is still pretty darn relevant. So
it's super relevant. It's super relevant. I still refer to it. It is always on my desk. It is right there. And I refer to it for myself, but also, in work that I'm doing, when I'm writing, whatever it might be, it is still so relevant. So I'm very excited to see the second edition. I know that we're going to share a link. So people, you can see it now. It's the first edition. You might want to hold off until next year and buy the second edition. But I'm delighted to hear that that's coming soon. So thank you for doing that.
Yes.
I frequently say, sorry, what was that?
And thank you for your kind words about it. I really appreciate it.
I do feel very fortunate to have access and, to have had that book. And so I was diagnosed in 1998. So I have had it for pretty much my whole, because I know I got it pretty early on. I frequently say diabetes has an image problem. And what I mean by that is that the way that people outside the diabetes world, and sometimes inside it as well, but I usually am referring to this about people outside the diabetes world, the way that they see diabetes. So it could be that person who feels the need to tell you about their grandmother when they find out that you have diabetes and want to tell you a horror story. It could be the way that diabetes is presented on the news, whatever it is in the media. How are we going at trying to really, speak about diabetes more broadly and have it understood about what it is, that it's not a blaming and shaming condition? I feel that there's so much blame and shame and guilt attached to diabetes. Do you think we're making headways there?
I think so, but not much. It is very disappointing for me that, we know that diabetes, and in particular, really primarily type 2 diabetes, is one of the few healthcare conditions left on this planet in Western civilization, where lay people and even some healthcare providers kind of think it's okay to blame people for getting it, and kind of think it's okay to blame people for not doing well. And that is not supported by the literature, by what the research is, or about how people struggle with their weight, why people struggle with their blood sugars. This is not a disease of personal failure or lack of self-discipline or willpower. And that's profoundly misunderstood. And so we see it getting better because we can actually pay attention to facts and realize that's ridiculous. But it's been taking a long time. And I feel like with you, I'm constantly hammering on people's heads and saying, you need to stop that. And we need to be respectful that, most importantly, whether you have type 1 or type 2 or anybody else, no one's unmotivated to want to live a long and healthy life. Things get in the way, but no one's unmotivated. And if you can believe that, we can cut the rest of this crap out. Pardon my words.
I think that is such an important place to start and think about. Nobody is unmotivated to be healthy. Everybody wants to be as healthy as they possibly can. And that's going to look different for people at different points in their life. And, if you speak with people with diabetes, and I feel this, there are times in my life where I feel I am so robust and I just have every resource behind me to go and manage my diabetes the best that I can in that moment. And in that moment, it ticks every single box in a how to manage diabetes manual. But there are other days that getting up in the morning is a struggle, and thinking about diabetes is all I can do, if I can do that at all. But never, ever do I think I don't want to be the healthiest that I possibly can. Yeah.
And like we talked about, if you're dealing with a disease or condition, I should say, that is 24/7, if anybody has a job like that, there's going to be times when you just say, I kind of have to take a little break. I got to put this on the back part of the stove here for a little while. And that's what happens. Some days it's easier, some days harder. But at heart, not you, not anyone is unmotivated to live a long and healthy life. So all this shaming and blaming, we all need to work together to make sure that gets tossed out the window.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I have a final question for you, and it is let's sum this up in one key piece of advice. What is it that you would say to somebody, whether newly diagnosed or if they've had diabetes for 20, 30, 40, however many years, what is it that you would say to them when it comes to, advising people about looking after their mental health and living with diabetes?
Okay, I'm going to say two things, not one.
Yeah.
I would remind them, no matter where they are, no matter how long they've had diabetes, even if they've even run into some problem with it, I'm going to say, number one, please remember it's the 21st century. And if you can stay engaged, that with good effort and good care, odds are pretty good you're going to do well. Can't make any guarantees, right? because we know there's other factors involved, but odds are pretty good. You can live a long, and you will live a long and healthy life. We need to say that to each other. We need to say it to parents. We need to say it to everybody. And the other one, of course, as I mentioned, is if there's any humanly way possible, please don't keep doing diabetes alone. Reach out to those folks in your family to get or loved ones to get the right kind of support and oomph that you need, whether that means a cup of tea like your husband, whether that means reaching out to the broader community so that you can get a chance to meet others who really get it and understand what you're going through. Believe me, that's how you can help keep your oomph up over the long term. And it really is wonderful. So those are the biggies I want to share.
I think that they are such brilliant pieces of advice. I'm going to say to everybody that please have a look at the Diabetes Australia website, because we have a lot of information about where you can find peer support groups and what peer support is and how you can engage in it. Bill, you mentioned early on, yes, one of my dearest friends in the diabetes world, who's an incredible advocate, Kerry Sparling, who has also just released a book called 6 Until Me, Essays of a Life with Diabetes. She wrote a blog for 14 years, which I know she's just archived, but she has collected some of the most incredible essays in her book. We will put a link in there. So if people are wanting to read, and I would, full disclosure, I do write a diabetes blog. Find people who are writing about diabetes. If you haven't got someone living 2 doors down that you can go for a walk with or something, find people writing about it. It's a good first step to feeling that connection with people. But if you can find Kerry's book, it is truly beautiful and so relevant. And still, even though some of the things that she wrote were sort of 10, 15 years ago, making those connections is really important. Listen to Bill Polonsky at every opportunity you possibly can. If you see that he is on a program somewhere and they are streaming it, jump on and watch that. This particular little question and answer will remain on our Facebook page, and it will be on our YouTube channel as well. Share it with every single person you know with diabetes or who is part of your life if you're living with diabetes, because there are so many wonderful words of wisdom here. Bill, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you again somewhere at a conference soon. Enjoy your time in Australia. Thanks to Omnipod for lending you to us for this 45-minute session, which has now gone over time. I'm sorry, but please be well and keep doing the incredible work that you do. We are so fortunate that you are doing it, and so grateful as well. But thank you, everybody. Nalin, we can end the broadcast now.